At 5 in the morning, I was pouring coffee in my kitchen when the sound of chainsaws tore through the quiet. I looked out the window and there she was. Brenda Thornfield, our self-anointed HOA queen, dressed head to toe in a spotless white pantsuit, revving a bright orange chainsaw like she was in some horror movie. She wasn't just cutting down my corn, she was hacking apart the irrigation system I'd built with my own hands over 3 long years. Diesel spilled everywhere, silver pipes split open, and then she climbed onto my grandfather's John Deere tractor and beat the engine block with a sledgehammer 23 swings I counted. When she tossed a road flare into the diesel-soaked field and watched 1,000 acres of corn explode in flames, my family's future went up with it. My name's Jackson Hartwell. Jack to those who matter. My grandfather homesteaded this Nebraska land in 1923. 3 generations have worked these fields, and until 2 years ago, my wife Sarah worked them beside me before cancer took her. The morning routines kept me sane after she passed. Coffee, the prairie wind, the rhythmic clicking of sprinklers, the crunch of black soil in my hands, it all meant life still moved forward. My kids clung to that rhythm too. Emma, a sophomore studying agricultural law, and Tyler still in high school, but already better on a combine than most adults. This land isn't just dirt, it's our identity carved into the Nebraska prairie. Then came Brenda. Fresh from a Malibu divorce settlement dripping in money and smugness, she moved into one of the brand-new McMansions sprouting along the edge of my farm. Within 6 months, she bullied her way into HOA president, promising to eliminate rural eyesores to raise property values. Her first move, a violation notice claiming the smell of manure, assaulted her neighbor's constitutional right to breathe clean air. I laughed when I got it, but then came fines, threats, more letters. She called my century-old farming practices incompatible with our lifestyle community. Her words, not mine. And thanks to some bureaucratic screw-up, my land was listed inside their HOA boundaries. A single signature from the previous owner meant I was trapped under her rules. My lawyer shrugged. Unless I could prove fraud, I had to play her game. She started showing up at my property line with cameras measuring sticks and a professional photographer who looked like he'd rather be shooting weddings. She documented the height of my corn, the location of every tractor, even the time I started chores. One night I caught her husband sneaking through my soybeans at 2 a.m. with surveying gear. When confronted, he mumbled about compliance verification before bolting to his Tesla like a scared deer. Then Brenda escalated. She drove her Tesla straight into my soybean field headlights off, making deliberate passes until she buried it axle deep in mud and destroyed $3,000 worth of crops. When I confronted her, she smirked. "Perhaps you should grow shorter vegetables." That was the moment I realized this wasn't some eccentric neighbor. This was war. Still, I fought back. I found Nebraska's Right to Farm Act protecting long-standing agriculture from suburban harassment. I installed security cameras. I filed complaints. The local community rallied Murphy's Kowalski's dozens of neighbors, while Brenda scraped together a handful of California transplants for her Property Values Matter group. My border collie Rex turned into a local legend. He could hear her Tesla half a mile away and bark exactly 30 seconds before she showed up. Kids made an app called Rex Alert. His accuracy was better than the weather forecast. But Brenda was relentless. She called an emergency HOA meeting and proposed a resolution banning all agricultural machinery within 500 feet of any residence. Combines, tractors, irrigation pumps, all gone. And she timed it just before harvest. If the ban passed, I'd lose $400,000 in crops rotting on the stalk. I stood in that packed room, smelling her overpowering perfume and the sweat of nervous neighbors, while she announced I should whisper to my corn, since her new ordinance allowed only 60 decibels quieter than normal conversation. And then my saving grace. Martha Kowalski stood up. She held a folder like it was a bomb and said, Brenda owed $2.3 million to California creditors. She exposed that the equipment ban wasn't about noise, it was Brenda's desperate bid to force me off my land so she could flip it to developers and bail herself out. 2 board members suddenly abstained. The resolution died. Brenda's composure cracked in public for the first time. I should have felt victorious, but that night I sat in my kitchen staring at paperwork and wondering if I was insane for holding on. My wife was gone. My land was burning. Maybe I should sell, walk away, let Brenda have her victory. For the first time I thought maybe I was the problem. Maybe my stubbornness was just ruining my kids' future. I poured another coffee, ready to give up, when I stumbled across Sarah's old research notes. She'd been studying agricultural law for her master's before cancer took her, and in those files I found proof 2 sets of HOA documents, one original from 2019 and one falsified. The original excluded my farm. The new one with Brenda's signature included it. Different handwriting, different paper, obvious whiteout marks. Fraud. Federal mail fraud, punishable by 20 years. I sat there shaking, surrounded by my late wife's handwriting, realizing Sarah had left me the weapon I needed. That moment flipped the switch inside me. I wasn't defending anymore. I was going on the attack. Brenda, though, wasn't done escalating. She sabotaged my irrigation at 3 in the morning, slashing hoses and smashing sprinkler heads, $18,000 in damage. She hired arsonists to torch my equipment shed. Flames roared while my family slept in the house. If the volunteer fire department hadn't made it in time, we'd be dead. Cameras caught her Tesla dropping the man off with gas cans. State investigators called it textbook arson. Then she tried bribing the prosecutor with $50,000 to bury my fraud evidence he was already wired by the FBI. And still she pressed harder. She hired armed mercenaries who showed up at dawn, black SUVs rolling onto my land, 6 men in tactical gear claiming emergency HOA authority to remove me. They waved fake legal notices like it was theater, but they hadn't counted on the Murphys live streaming the standoff. Within minutes, 30 neighbors formed a human barrier. Sheriff Bradley arrived with lights blazing, state troopers right behind. He gave the mercenaries 60 seconds to leave or face arrest for armed trespass. They left tails tucked. But Brenda wasn't done humiliating herself. She arrived moments later, stepping out of her Tesla, screaming on a Facebook live stream already pulling hundreds of thousands of viewers. She called us peasants, said she'd sue us all into bankruptcy. My border collie stood his ground, hackles raised as she tried storming my porch. Rex blocked her path, and the live stream chat exploded with donations for his legal defense fund. The FBI rolled in that afternoon, seizing records from her villa, exposing a multi-state fraud conspiracy. But I wasn't going to let this end behind closed doors. No, I wanted her collapse to happen in front of everyone. The courthouse was packed, standing room only, national media crammed along the walls. Brenda walked in late, wrapped in a pink designer suit, dragging a high-priced attorney behind her. She thought this was her stage. My lawyer laid out the evidence, the original HOA documents against her forged ones. Even from the back row, you could see the whiteout marks, the handwriting differences. Gasps filled the room. Then the prosecutor stood and announced Brenda was already under federal investigation for fraud, bribery, conspiracy. He described the bribe she'd offered him. Brenda snapped. She screamed it was all lies, that we were backward farmers destroying property values. She was still ranting when Judge Miller dissolved the entire HOA on the spot, nullifying every action against me. The crowd erupted, but the real finale came when FBI agent Martinez rose from the gallery. He walked straight toward Brenda and announced she was under arrest for document fraud, mail fraud, and racketeering. He read her rights while cameras flashed and the whole county cheered. Brenda broke down completely, shouting that she was the victim, that peasants like me were ruining America. But it didn't matter. They cuffed her, marched her out in front of everyone, her Tesla abandoned like a monument to arrogance in the parking lot. The HOA collapsed overnight. Investors pulled out. Villa residents panicked. And for the first time in months, I stood tall, knowing the nightmare was over. That's where my story ends, not with a celebration, not with champagne, just the moment the bully finally fell. Because sometimes the only way to protect what matters isn't by playing defense, it's by refusing to back down and letting the truth burn brighter than the lies. And if there's one lesson in all this, it's simple. Never underestimate a farmer backed into a corner.